This is Joanne Jenkins, CEO of AARP. The coronavirus continues to affect us all, and we are here actively supporting you and your community. Every day, we're providing trusted information from top health experts, sharing tools to help protect families from fraud, and creating resources to support family caregivers everywhere. As always, you can count on AARP to advocate for you and your family. Join us and stay connected at aarp.org/coronavirus.
Deeper Than Music Radio. Behind every great song is a greater story.
Deeper than music. The core of you, the fans, the truth is deeper than music. Deeper than music. Simply the truth is the latest, the newest. Deeper than music. Deeper than music. The core of you, the fans, the truth is deeper than music. Deeper than music. Simply the truth is the latest, the newest. Deeper than music. Deeper than music.
Hello, 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 hello. Deeper Than Music Radio. Behind every great song is an even greater story. I'd like to say what's up to everybody listening to us on every podcasting platform. We're streamed on iHeartRadio, Spotify, Spreaker, Google Podcasts, and Apple Podcasts. Today we have a very, very special episode with some people that are coming out with something very wonderful and something that's very much needed in these times. I know that right now, as a whole, as a world, we're going through a lot right now with this pandemic. One thing that we also want to focus on is our mental health, and to make sure that everything is good with us. Along the lines with mental health, we want to make sure that everybody's okay and everybody's doing well. But these guests that I have on the show tonight are doing something very phenomenal, and we'll just get right to it. We have a special guest. The first person I want to introduce is and talk about as a whole is Mary Albertoli. They came up with this idea, the show called The Shift. Mary was still is a clinical social worker, and she was alarmed by the growing suicide rates in young Americans, and she decided to do something. So she developed this idea, and it's a docu-series called The Shift, after being affected by a headline about a 9-year-old girl's suicide. So she partnered with, also who's on the call as well, as co-creators, producers Nadia Sarmova and Maureen Isern, and the USC Media Institute of Social Change to come up with this docu-series called The Shift. So along with Mary, we also have Nadia, who's also a producer, writer, and social entrepreneur who's focused on creating social change through visual storytelling, and also Maureen Isern, who's also a producer. So ladies and gentlemen, from The Shift, we have Mary, Maureen, and Nadia. How you guys doing today?
Glad to be here. Pleasure to be here. Thank you so much.
Oh, no, not a problem. Thank you for being on the show and just doing this phenomenal thing, because as we'll discover, and as you guys discovered through this interview, is that teen suicide amongst our young adults is at a high rate. So, Mary, I spoke a little bit about your motivation. Could you expand further on what motivated you to create The Shift?
Well, sure. As you mentioned, I was a clinical social worker for about 12 years, and I worked with children and families and adolescents and in psychiatric settings, hospitals, outpatient, usually ones who felt like they were going to either take their life or take someone else's life, before we had them diagnosed and brought into the hospital. And what really inspired me, though, about The Shift was I saw on the news how many 9-year-olds or even younger kids were resigned about their lives at that young age, tender age, that they took their lives. And there was one in particular, about a 9-year-old, I believe she was in South Carolina, and she hung herself in her room because she went through a lot of racial bullying, and it broke my heart. It hit the point where it's like, I'm a social worker, I have a voice, I have to find a way to get these young adults and teens a larger platform by which they can speak from, so we can really hear what they're going through and open up the dialogue and remove the stigma around mental health and alignment, because it is so necessary for us to get over those stigmas. They just get in the way, and they separate us from communicating in a fashion that really empowers us. So I had the fortunate and I feel very privileged and lucky to have Maureen Isern, who I met, pretty much out of the gate with the project. She loved it. She was moved, and she climbed on board the train, so to speak, or bus, actually. And then so did Nadia Sarmova, and I shared my vision. They've been the creators. They've been my architects. They've been the body of how this is all coming into fruition.
It's crazy how you just say 9-year-olds, because at 9 years old, where I was at 9 years old, that was never a thought in my mind, right? Like the closest thing to harm was Tom and Jerry, just wow. And then before the shift, like what led your calling to become a social worker?
It could be my Catholic background. It could be a lot of different reasons. It could be, culturally or, how I was raised. I guess deeper in my heart, though, I felt it was a calling. I felt that it was kind of like my duty and my responsibility to really care about others in a way that could help ease their suffering. However, I found in the process, I have been able to achieve my mental alignment through the journey. So it was because I had things I had gone through, and I identified so much with the patients that I treated. It almost helped, and it pushed me to seek my own health and my well-being. Because in order to be able to be there for them in a way, because it should be about them, not me. But I needed to, be able to clear my own issues and be flat with those before I could really be there for others.
So it's also a journey of self-discovery, if you will. Exactly.
Better said.
And then Nadia or Maureen or Mo, when this opportunity presented itself, what were your guys' initial thoughts? And second question, what decided you to get on board and help bring this into fruition?
This is Mo. For me, when Mary described to me what she envisioned, it really spoke to my entire career as a social impact producer. It's something that's called my heart to really understand people more deeply and connect people to our humanity and help people take actions, through storytelling. So I felt like I told Mary, we were supposed to meet for this conversation. And same when when we met Nadia, like we were supposed to meet to make this happen. So it was automatic.
And then Nadia, your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, Mo really said it well. I've been in the industry as a content producer in digital TV and film now for over a decade, and I run a production company that really has an emphasis on producing impactainment, and that's essentially entertainment that does just that, entertains, but also empowers and inspires people to action around a variety of relevant social issues. So it was a no-brainer when I met Mary and Mo within our first conversation. Not only did I fall in love with them, but the cause really spoke to me, and I never looked back.
Awesome. And Mary, like you said, it's alarming within 9-year-olds. And I wanted to ask your professional opinion. What are the factors that this rate is so alarming? What do you think the factors are as far as the increase in suicide amongst young Americans or young adults, young people? Sorry.
That is a wonderful question. I think that's one of the things that we really want to tease out in the shifts with the many different topics that we're going to, take on. Anywhere from, the overall umbrella of depression and anxiety, why that's increased, and then how is it manifested in the world? How is it shown up with the school shootings and with suicides and with peer bullying and with the academic pressure? So there's so many things that could be a part of this. That's why instead of assuming that we know anything, really just the biggest thing we want to do is stop the stigma and have conversations so we can find out and really hear what our youth are saying. and what they're going through, and then provide the resources they need, no matter where they live in the country, and bring that to them. So, because, with mental health, affordability is a factor. Yeah. Insurance is, people who want it, it may not be available because their area is too rural. I mean, we need to be able to hear everybody, be a voice for every teen and young adult in this country through the shift.
And I know, like, as far as like with my experience, there was a lot of things that I wasn't aware of when going to counseling, me and my daughter. As far as parents, what advice would you give them? Because a lot of times we don't know, or when we find out certain things, or when we try to gauge our kids, or especially with social media and, the internet, what advice would you give parents? Like what to monitor or stay on top of?
Well, we were discussing all of that. One of the things that actually, Mo, Nadia, and I have said is to have those daily mental health checks. Really have it a common daily occurrence where, especially in these times, it feels comfortable to say, how are you doing? How are you feeling? What's going on? Is there something there? Or just to make the family feel comfortable to discuss hard issues, like just checking in is a big thing, and giving permission to our youth to speak out in a way that they don't feel judged or that there's something wrong with them. I guess that would be, because the whole point of the shift is to really stop the stigma and start the conversation.
I think another layer of that is really looking at how we can listen, openly listen without adding our own things in. So a lot of times, I'm a parent, and, I think creating that space to just allow whatever is being said to be said without necessarily a strong, reaction, but just making it okay to speak, to communicate. I think that's something that it can take something for people to allow that. It's new for us. Yeah.
Because, the old philosophy of kids are supposed to be seen, not heard, is detrimental, right? Like, you want to create that open door. So I wanted to further the question and ask, how were you, like, before joining and becoming part of Shift, were you guys in any way affected by this stigma in any way?
Sure.
Yeah, sure. So, I lost my brother, unfortunately, when I was 14 years old. He was hit by a car riding his bicycle. He was 10 and a half, and I was devastated because he was my world back then. We had the typical dysfunctional family, and things weren't always easy, and a lot of fighting going on, and he and I would be there for each other during the tough times. So, but when he died, the ideas of suicide did come up for me, and I went into a depression, and my parents were ill-equipped to handle it. My mother started to drink, and my father went into his religious organization to get some relief, and I was left on my own. So I fell into my own depression, and it was pretty much like fear. Fear kind of ruled the house, because I was failing in school, and I was basically told, if you don't get yourself together, we're gonna, my parents were tough. Mm-hmm. And so I was scared almost into this sense of, if I don't perform and show that I look good, despite the fact that I just lost my brother like 6 months ago.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's like the pressure right there and then would cause anyone to have anxiety and depression, because people aren't talking. And
and as far as Mo and Nadia.
Yeah, this is Nadia. I grew up, my family is originally from Eastern Europe. I'm Bulgarian American. And I grew up in a family with both my parents. I was fortunate enough to be brought up with both of my parents being present. And, they allowed and encouraged us to talk about everything, mm-hmm. at the dinner table in particular. And so, unlike many young people, I actually had an outlet for openness and conversation. And so it really wasn't until much, much later in my adulthood that I actually experienced and struggled with some mental health issues. But I really, take my cap off to my parents in particular. Makes me tear up even now, thinking about them, because they were able to be there and to create openness and freedom to talk about anything and everything without being judged or without having that fear.
Yeah.
And I could only wish that for every young person, every person for that matter. And that has really been able to provide that to millions and if not billions of people around the world. That has really been my motivating factor.
And you know what? You bring up a good point, because I say social media is killing our social skills, which leads to my next question. With how much or what percentage or how much of an influence does social media have with this epidemic?
Sure. And I'll share with you something as well. But first, I'll answer your question. So social media is, a large player in what's causing a lot of anxiety. One of the organizations that we've had the opportunity to talk with as we've been developing this is Half the Story, and really seeing the work that they've done and what they've discovered around the way that young people feel splintered, showing only pieces of life or only seeing pieces of life from other people and then comparing themselves and leaving them left with things missing or something's wrong. And, we could say that applies to all of us, not just young people.
Yeah.
But social media definitely creates also a safe space for bullying to happen on a different level. You can go down comment threads on people's pages sometimes. I was doing that recently, and I just was mortified at how people treat each other when they're safe behind a screen.
Yeah.
And you wonder where, how did that person deal with those 65 comments when they came in? I'm curious, One thing I want to share, though, that came up earlier when you asked about the stigma around, things that we've dealt with, was not only was my phone on mute, which was so appropriate because it kept me from sharing, but the amount of bodily anxiety that came up around sharing just really showed me how, like, the stigma is still there. It's not that the stigma, doesn't stay. It's really the courage, that, like, Mary, for instance, just had sharing what she shared, and the courage to just share what's there.
Yeah.
And taking that step each time, not knowing necessarily how people are going to hear you. But surprisingly, you find a lot of people are relieved to hear you share something that maybe they can relate to or understand better because you shared.
Yeah. And I know from my perspective, when my mom shared this, in the minority, or particularly I can speak from my background, African Americans, there's a stigma about going to the doctor or going to see a counselor or about your mental health. And with dealing with my daughter and her cutting issue, I actually last year I had a panic attack. I thought I was having a stroke, but luckily it was a panic attack. And that's when I was like, you know what? I need to go to counseling. I need to work through all this anxiety built up. And my mom brought to me like, well, normally the family doesn't talk about this or talk about that. And one thing that you, Nadia, that you spoke to was, and I think this is a big factor, is being open, being able to communicate, which is very, very huge. And people need to talk about that. So we've talked about this and we talked about the shift. I wanted to know, you guys got together, like, what was at a high level, what was the process of bringing the pieces together for the series, and like, how did it all come together after you guys had this meeting of the minds?
I can speak to that. So, we sat down and we really fleshed out, how is this going to work? How do you take this topic and open it up? And then what do you do once it's open? So I think what came up very quickly was, this can be a can of worms and we need to be responsible for it.
Yeah.
And that quickly led us into really ideating at large scale. How does this get supported by the right people so that what we open up as a conversation can then be managed responsibly, and we can have resources in place to respond and, be available, and resources that are already there and just aren't accessible because people don't know about them or because they're ashamed. And our intention right away was we want to really make this as common a conversation as cancer, or a lot of these conversations that over these decades we've seen come from hidden to completely available to us. So that was really our intention. We rounded up a group of young people through our network. We filmed in one day a promo to just really test what happens, like prove that this conversation was wanted. We asked young people, was this something they wanted to be part of? Immediately got a lot of enrollment in that. And the day that we filmed, I believe it was November 15, I'll never forget, there was silence in the studio before and after, where we could just really feel the magnitude of what we just started. And from there, we took the promo, we put it together, we started sharing it with organizations, sharing it with people who, are actors, influencers, athletes that have, dealt with these issues, might have something to lend to the conversation. We talked to a ton of young people. We talked to school, principals, teachers, college students, and ultimately started a fundraising campaign last fall for $55,000 to develop a pilot. And with that, we were able to, also generate interest and a partnership with USC's Media Institute for Social Change, MISC, and, talk to them about including their story, their campus stories in the pilot to start to explore what the impact is of mental health and anxiety going unchecked in a community of young people all over the country, what that looks like, here, and what they're doing, to respond to that.
Wow. No, that's very impressive. And since we've been talking about Shift and how it came together in the genesis, can we get a high level explanation of the Shift, the series itself?
Sure. Hey guys, I got kicked off, but I'm back. So
okay, welcome back.
Yeah, thank you for having us. So The Shift is as much a docu-series as it is a social movement, and together they are really out to empower teens and young adults to transform the conversation about mental health. And the series will accomplish this through its iconic vehicle for change, a bus turned into a studio, which is intended to travel through communities in the U.S. to, again, normalize health conversations young people are struggling with from day to day, and really to connect communities to a wide range of tools and resources, including experts, nonprofit organizations, and eventually we hope to create a mental health app.
Wow, that's amazing. Bringing this together, what was the most challenging aspect?
This is Nadia. So I'd love to take a stab at this. So our collaboration on The Shift has not been challenging at all. As I alluded to earlier, it has been just super rewarding. Personally, I couldn't ask for more committed and generous and kind-hearted partners. As I find myself with Maureen and with Mary. The Shift series falls into a unique genre of programming, something that we call impactainment. And so the challenge has been really in reimagining and striking a balance in creating content that is entertaining and informative.
Yeah.
And that also has an extended lifespan beyond the screen that engages and provides resources to communities.
So you want to keep them engaged, but also after the show or after they watch it, hey, I need to talk to such and such, or to do further research. So just impact them beyond just viewing the series.
Absolutely. That's really where the tire meets the rubber meets the cement. It's the show is really just the beginning of a much greater movement. We are really out to create mental well-being throughout every community in the U.S. and globally. And the way we're hoping to do that is through on-the-ground resources that viewers everywhere can access. And Mo can even speak more to the Impact campaign, but that's, the series is just the beginning. And the magic really lives in the campaign.
Okay.
Absolutely. And if I can say one thing that also has been a challenge at times has been those moments where it felt like we couldn't move fast enough. I remember there were a series of months where we kept sharing the headlines with each other that were coming through of the new suicide or, spree of shootings, gang violence, all of these things that we kept seeing in the young community. And we just thought, why haven't we finished making this yet? And yet we were just starting. And these things in any situation take quite a bit of time to build.
Yeah.
So that's been challenging, is just keeping ourselves grounded to not get so frustrated that it's it's painful that we can't move faster.
Yeah. And ultimately, we spoke about, viewers watching the show and then actually being enlightened and then further talking about or taking action. What else do you want viewers to get out of the shift?
So the reason that we're partnering with organizations is to provide actionable steps. Mm-hmm. What we really want people left with is that there's nothing wrong or broken, and that conversations can really create access to anything, right? So starting the conversation is the first step. What we want people to take on as actions is getting curious and looking at the resources that are in your environment and asking people in your environment what they have used themselves or what they've seen be effective in school environments, engaging with the resources in the school. The challenge is knowing schools are strapped themselves and they don't always have resources to handle the needs of the students. So then it's these organizations that we're really looking at, like nationally, regionally. Some of our partners, can access every zip code in the country. So their resources, their information and content that we create that can just continue to provide insight, will hopefully keep people engaged in the conversation in a way that feels relatable versus isolated and strange and mysterious and, uncomfortable.
So we talked about the challenges and what do you want the viewers to get out of the show? And again, I thank you guys for bringing this because this is very much needed. And I mean, you guys mentioned the shootings and other things that I didn't even think about. I'm like, yeah, that's true. This. On the flip side, what has been the most rewarding aspect of putting this wonderful project together?
If I could speak to that, outside of having the opportunity to work with two very committed souls, it's giving me more insight into humanity around what Maureen was just speaking to, that through our language, we can create things that are just extraordinary. And we're able to let go of things that we thought we could never let go of.
Yeah.
And, there's such release for people when they're able to open up and share, like one of the boys on the promo was 21. For the first time in his life, opened up that he felt like killing himself pretty much every day.
Wow.
And he actually attempted it 6 months before, but didn't go through with it because he stopped himself and cried and he didn't want to die. He just didn't know how to live. But on the show, he opened up, and I got to tell you, so transformed. Today, he's happy. He has a good job. He's pursuing an acting career. Yeah.
One of the things that's been super rewarding along the way has been this incredible experience of everyone we've talked to that isn't necessarily going to be in the show. It might be our insurance agent. It might be our accountant. It might be our crew. It might be our partners. They have a story that this brings up for them, and they thank us, and they often share with us a personal story that isn't a typical part of a quote business conversation, right? So we're sitting here in our day-to-day actually giving other people like that opening and or having that connection with them to get to know them better and have them know us better, and it just changes like your experience of any kind of work. It's been really fascinating is to see that the impact of the shift has actually started just by attempting to create it. So we're super excited to see what happens when it's truly, fully a living, breathing, experience for people.
And my first initial question is I wanted to think, because when I first started and I read into the promo, I thought paradigm shift. A question, the name The Shift, how'd that come about?
Well, we were all tossing ideas around for a while, and the idea was something that came to me one morning when I just continuously was asking myself, what are we out to here? Like, what will make a difference? What are we asking for? And that idea that 1 degree can make such a huge difference. It can send you on a completely different trajectory. One conversation, like Mary mentioned with Anthony, it can change your entire future, and it changes the future that you impact. So it resonated with the group, and it's caught on. It's caught on quickly.
Yeah, it's pretty. I like that. It's catchy. So you guys go through the whole process. Afterthoughts. What were like lessons learned? What were any enlightenments after doing all this that you weren't aware of before working on this project?
Well, to be clear, we've only produced the promo. So the show itself is still being developed, and we'll be, continuing to develop that this year and hopefully filming a full pilot in the fall. But we're also producing content, to release earlier through digital. But I think what we've learned is just that this is so needed. And, I don't think take special credit per se for what's going to come from all of this, because, the credit will lie in the people who are willing to take what we're offering and use it. Right. Yeah. It doesn't make a difference that we had an idea. What matters is that people will enroll and actually participate, and the partners that, just work every day, serving young people and everyone around them with mental health services. Those are the people we're really looking to empower so that their services can be available for people on a greater scale.
So we're dealing with this pandemic, the coronavirus. How do we stay, especially because I was watching the news yesterday and something disheartening came up. There were like a large cases of abuses going on now with the social distancing and staying at home. What advice would you guys give as far as young adults' mental health as well as older adults' mental health, everybody's mental health during this coronavirus? How do we stay mentally well during this time?
Well, I would like to say that I know we're sitting in a lot of unknowns, and that's okay. I know people want to have the answer, and it's okay sometimes just to be still. It's okay sometimes just to be with you and with your family and to be connected and make that the most important priority. It's okay. We, in a way, don't know when we'll have time like this again. And I know there's a lot of horrific coming from it in terms of the death toll. I mourn for these families. I can't only imagine what they're going through. Yeah. But to really have conversations, it's okay not to have the answers. It's okay not to have the answers. It's okay just to be there for each other.
And what are you guys doing to be mentally sane during these I like how you say it's the unknown, right? We all fear the unknown, and we don't know what tomorrow, next week, or even next month will bring.
I think we're really prioritizing staying in communication. And in fact, on some of our weekly calls, Mary has started asking us, we do a little check-in at the very beginning, and we may spend 2 minutes on it. We may spend 20, but we clear ourselves of what's in our space so that we can really be able to, move forward with that, support. And sometimes that means wide conversation after, and sometimes we get it right there, and sometimes just sharing it like resolves it. It just disappears that you have a space to express it. And really what we're out to do, not only as a team for each other, but, you know, in mass through this movement, is have it be that it's okay to express yourself, to share. And I think a truth that is going to come up in what we're creating is it's not always safe to share, right? And as you said, sometimes you're not in a safe environment. And I think that's going to be something that we'll be exploring. Just, you know, what is the feedback we hear from the community through these conversations about the reality, and that will definitely illuminate a lot of needs that hopefully can be addressed.
And again, I want to thank you guys for bringing this together. Like I said, in my research, and then also talking with my friends and discovering that a lot of people are dealing with this, I think that this movement is going to be huge. Like you guys said, it's going to create that door of people to share. As with all my great interviews, again, thank you guys. It goes by so fast, but I just wanted like 5 minutes left. It's self-promotion time. Where can people hear more about this great project, the release, what outlets is going to be? This is your guys' time.
On Instagram, please support The Shift at @TheShift_series. And on Facebook, The Shift Show Official.
Awesome. And any other parting thoughts before we end another great show of Deeper Than Music?
I just wanted to thank you again for having us on. It's people like yourself that are inspired by what we're up to that gives us the strength we need to move forward. So thank you.
No, not a problem. And guys, thank you so much, because I mean, we don't realize, but a lot of people are affected by this. And I like how you all said it's the conversation. The conversation needs to be had, and it starts with the conversation.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for the support.
Not a problem. Anytime. So, ladies and gentlemen, we have here The Shift. You have the social medias, and be on the lookout for it. We have Nadia, Mo, and Mary, and this is Mark. And we're signing off with Deeper Than Music Radio. And thank you for tuning in. And be sure to check out this wonderful, great thing. And I just want to say I'm looking forward to this. And I feel like there's going to be a lot of conversation had and a lot of enlightenment. And I definitely appreciate you guys and for what you do.
Thank you. Likewise.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Deeper than music. The core of you, the fans, the truth is deeper than music. Deeper than music. Simply the truth is the latest, the newest. It's deeper than music. Deeper than music. The core of you, the fans, the truth is deeper than music. Deeper than music. Simply the truth is the latest, the newest. It's deeper than music. Deeper than music.